All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is May 6th, and our first section on May, and as usual, Asian philosophies. And right now we are in the process, in the journey of reading Zhuangzi's 7 inner section. Let's go over our schedule. Okay. Last week we read a satirical novel, actually one short story. From the novel, it's a long book, okay, but we only read one short story, which is a criticized or satirical story to the Confucian society. And then the week before, we talk about Zhuangzi, the inner chapter, which is the happy excursion, okay. Zhuangzi had 7 chapters. In the inner, there are 33 chapters. And then my plan so far is to read the 7th chapter, the first 7 chapter, which being considered the most important, is a comprehensive Zhuangzi's philosophy in this 7th chapter. So today we are going to read the 2nd chapter. The title is On the Equality of Things. I hope you spend time to read the assignment. And then if you feel it's very difficult or doesn't make sense, that's common. But you should, probably you already heard the story of the butterfly dream. And that's the ending. So we will make sure we talk about this. And then next week, we will continue to read the 3rd chapter, which we call it the fundamental for the cultivation of life. There are many different translations, but I will use Feng You Lan as translation on that. And May 20th, the event we have is we are going, SK is going to review the Bhagavad Gita from chapter 1 to chapter 6. You know, Bhagavad Gita have 16 chapters, and we are going to every month, roughly every month, we go through 2 chapters. We have been through chapter 6, which is 1/3 of the total, the entire book. And usually we take Bhagavad Gita's 18 chapter with 3 parts. So 1 to 6, 7 to 12, 13 to 18. So that's the time to review the first part. And at the end of May, I have a guest speaker. Kwang is going to talk about Mencius, who is the 2nd philosopher from Confucianism. So we are going to talk about Mencius on his role as a philosopher and the state counselor, and during the time, the history in China. And the book I'm following is this book, okay, it's called Zhuangzi with Guo Xiang's interpretation. Zhuangzi lived in the about 23,000 years ago, okay, on the 300 BCE. And then Guo Xiang is a great interpreter. He lived on the 3rd century in China. He make a lot of commentary on Zhuangzi. And Feng You Lan is the 20th century philosopher, and he was the student of Zhang Zi, and he studied with Zhang Zi in, I think, in Columbia or Chicago, and then back to China. And then he made the translation and for the Zhuangzi inner section with Guo Xiang's interpretation or Guo Xiang's commentary. So we are going to use this book, and you will see at least 3 voices: Zhuangzi's voice, and Guo Xiang's voice, and Feng You Lan's voice. And then, of course, I will have my own opinion. And then if you read it, or either before the meetup or during the session, if you have your thought, your question, then you are welcome to share. And then, so I will pause for a minute before we officially talk about the chapter 2. Is anything want to talk about before? If you read something, how do you think about this chapter, or you already know something about this chapter? Anything you want to share or you want to talk or want to ask? So I will have a better idea, during the section I will focus. Because this one, be honest, this one is very, very long. It's almost impossible to finish, but I will try my best without rushing. Okay, so if we don't finish, I will try to make a makeup or mix with next week section, because next week chapter 3 is much shorter. So so I would like to make sure we cover this section in the right way, in my opinion, because most of people cannot finish this one in one reading, because I've been trying to finish this reading since long time ago, 30 years ago. It's too long and too complicated. So eventually, because this meetup, I force myself to go through it, and I find out it's very beneficial, and I really like to share with everyone. Yeah. Question? No? Anybody read, find out it's difficult, or anyone have any thought on this? Okay, so I'm going to move on, and then so just for the people who are not familiar with Zhuangzi, Laozi, the Tao Te Ching is the most important Taoism philosophy writing. But Laozi, Tao Te Ching is kind of like a poetry, and they're not very clear. And Zhuangzi become much more clear. Okay, so in general, Zhuangzi have 33 chapters. That's the book we have. And then the inner chapter, between 1 to 7, usually we consider as written by Zhuangzi, the person. Of course, this one, historical, also debatable, but that's not my interest. But I think this 7th chapter is worth to study carefully. And the miscellaneous usually consider as the people in the later time. They write something attribute to Zhuangzi. And the so-called outer chapter between 8 to 22 usually consider is they are being written by Zhuangzi's disciples. So that's the idea. So we are on the second time we read the chapter 2, okay, Qi Wu Lun, okay, which is on the equality of things. Each chapter, you will see the Chinese name, they all 3 Chinese characters, and then they all have a different translation, except this one, okay, on the equality of things. I see any other English translation have different name. So basically, it's pretty accurate translation, okay, but doesn't mean it necessarily reflect what Zhuangzi want to talk about in this book. So a few seconds about Zhuangzi Zhu, which is by the person Guo Xiang, who lived about, let's say, 500 years after Zhuangzi. He living in the time of let me see, mysticism and Taoism religious, okay, is coming. So he, a great scholar, he made a commentary on this one. And I probably don't want to talk too much about this commentary, but we will see his commentary. But again, this chapter is difficult in the sense it's close to Western philosophy. So Guo Xiang may not have a very good commentary. On the other hand, since Feng You Lan was trained in America, so he probably has better interpretation. So today you might see I show more Feng You Lan's interpretation than Guo Xiang's interpretation. And then in last year, I have the date here, and then when you look at the PowerPoint file, you will find it in the meetup page. You can go back to check these 2 videos, which is hosted by Pin, I think last year he spent 2 meetups, which is 4 hours, try to finish this chapter. And I have to say he did a very good job in the detail, but in 2 weeks, 2 meetups, he didn't finish all of them. Okay, he only finished 50% of that. So that's the common problem of reading this chapter because it's very dense. The content is very dense. So when you go to deep inside, usually you lost the big picture. And then when you try to take the overall view, you cannot cover all the detail. So today I'm going to try to make sure, give you a big picture and go to some of the detail. And some detail, if you are interested and then I'm not covered, I will try to cover in the several different, another meetup. But I just give you an idea how does this one, this chapter is different than others. So let's talk about the name. Since it called the equality of things, okay, and then I think this equality probably not, I don't know, everybody based on your background, you might have the different concept of equality. Okay, in Chinese word called qi, in general means equal. That's no doubt about it. In the Western side, in the American, we may think about equality as everybody is equal, but that's my opinion. I put in this color, light purple, usually means my opinion. I think the equality in Zhuangzi means indistinguishableness. That means they are not the same. Not talking about they are equal. Okay, that's my understanding. But you can tell me how do you think, during after the section. So I put in the red, that means Guo Xiang's interpretation. I put in the blue, that means that's Feng You Lan's interpretation. And that's interesting. Before we start, let's see how these 2 philosophers comment on this chapter. So Guo Xiang said, everything considers itself to be right and others to be wrong, itself to be beautiful and others to be ugly. Everything is what it is. The opinion of the one and the other are different. That they both have opinions is the same. So Guo Xiang is talking about everyone have his own or her own opinion. They all different, but only thing the same, so-called equal, is they all have opinion. These opinions are identical. So he put the equal, meaning of equal, on this concept of opinion. They are equal, but there's nothing right and wrong. Feng You Lan has his comment on this one. He talked about this shows that although in ordinary appearance, there are differences between things in delusion or in dream. One thing can also be another. The transformation of things proves that the differences among things are not absolute. So Feng You Lan kind of take the relativity point of view, relativism point of view on this philosophy. And then, hold on, okay, this way. And he focused on transformation of things. And I think he meant the butterfly dream. Okay, so if you have read this one or you have some background about this chapter, you probably already heard the butterfly dream. And then butterfly dream, the story is very simple. It's talking about Zhuang Zi, the philosopher. One day he dreamed about himself as a butterfly. He was happy. And then when he wake up, he realized that was a dream. And then he started to doubt it. Am I a person just dream about butterfly, or I was a butterfly. I dream as a person right now, because he's talking about he has no way to verify he is in the dream or not in the dream, kind of like Descartes' skepticism, right? He's not sure, he's in the dream when Descartes sitting next to the fireplace, holding a piece of paper. He's not sure he's dream or not dream. I think that's a similar kind of skepticism they are thinking. And then you will have a different interpretation. Remember, this short story is being put in this long chapter at the very end. Okay, so most of people know this story and they have their own interpretation. So I would like you to know this story first, then go through the long chapter, then see what's the deep meaning of this butterfly dream. So for this reason, I asked ChatGPT, okay, I asked ChatGPT, what's the philosophical meaning of Zhuangzi's butterfly dream? Okay, so a pretty good answer, but nothing wrong, a good college paper. So basically, I just summarized three things. He talked about like, we cannot be sure our perception of the world are accurate. Yeah, okay. Second thing, the ChatGPT talk about this one is a critique of the concept of fixed and objective reality. So he talked about relativism, which is also correct. Number three, he talked about the story can be seen as a call to embrace the impermanence and uncertainty of existence, which is also a correct interpretation in my opinion, but I think the word impermanence is too much Buddhism thinking on this one. So that's ChatGPT's interpretation. And of course, it's a AI generated so-called pre-trained transmitter. So you can ask again and again, you will get a different answer. But I hope after today's section, you will have much deeper understanding of this chapter and what Zhuangzi want to talk about. So before I start to read the first line, and I would like to give you a big picture on this chapter. If you were here for last week, and we talk about chapter 1, the what do we call it? The happy excursion, or say happy wandering around. So I kind of consider chapter 1 is similar to Nietzsche's Zarathustra, talk about Uberman, okay, and he talk about Big Bird, talk about the ancient sage. Then they have a dialogue about the usefulness for the big one, for the small one, all this kind of conversation. And this chapter is different. Okay, it's not Zhuangzi is speaking. It's kind of like Plato's dialogue, but you have the full dialogue. So they have the first dialogue, okay, with a person called Nan Guo Ziqi, that's the Taoist teacher, and his disciple, Yan Chengzi, okay, that's his disciple, the dialogue. But actually, if you read Plato's dialogue, is the way, Socrates and somebody talk, and turn out with a long speech of Socrates. Okay, so same as this one, they just a few dialogue, they become a long dialogue. Second one, then when you finish, then Zhuangzi put the second dialogue, which is the person called Nie Que and Wang Ni. Okay, and I think based on the name, he talked about the person. The meaning of the name means toothless. Okay, so the guy without teeth, and a toddler kid have a conversation. You have seen the interlocutor level kind of drop down from the philosopher teachers to the toothless people and the toddler kid, or sometimes translated as the baby kid. Okay, they talk about something. This one is shorter. Then number 3, they start another dialogue, and the two person. Okay, usually people treat as 2 person. One is 巨阙子, one is so-called the 常无子. Okay, so it sounds very religious Taoist priest name. Okay, but actually, if you look at the meaning of name, actually, Zhuangzi talking about a magpie, a bird, is talking to the twig. So actually, it's an animal talk, okay? But they talk about Confucius, they talk about dreaming, talk about awakening, philosophical talk between the birds and the twig. Okay? And then the fourth dialogue, a very short dialogue, talk about a shadow and penumbra. Okay? I think penumbra means the second shadow, the shadow's shadow, their dialogue. Okay, they want to talk about this word. Is this word deterministic or free? Okay, I think that's they want to talk. And then bring up the butterfly dream. So that's the whole structure of this chapter. Okay. And then remember, there's a full dialogue, and there's a very long essay on the dialogue one. So I might skip some of them because it's very easy to fall asleep during this one, because just like when you read Plato's dialogue, when you go through Socrates' long speech, same kind of feeling. Okay. So that's the way we are going to do. And the key I want everyone to put in mind is the butterfly dream. It end lead to the butterfly dream, and compare to what you will learn after read this full dialogue, then talk about butterfly dream. What's the difference between this kind of experience or if you just read the butterfly dream? I believe there's a big difference. Yeah. So question, comment, discussion. I will pause for 1 minute if you have a question, comment. Party, right?
Yes, I really like the way that you've broken down this chapter. It now makes a lot much more sense in my head. So that's all for now. Thank you.
Oh yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you. You say that because I feel I just like I say, I try to read this chapter. It's very difficult, and then when I prepare this section, I try to make sense on this one, and I find out this way of breakdown. And I didn't see any other scholastic paper breakdown in this way. And I see this one and make everything make sense, and it's easy to read after this. So I really appreciate that you recognize this. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. The chapter did resonate with me in many different ways, but
Yeah,
I couldn't quite parse it out until I see it sort of, the William James aspect, and then
yes,
really like your breakdown. Thank you.
Yeah. So you read the William James Pure Experience from Feng You Lan. Carly, did
Yeah, I read into some of that, and I read into the I just lost it. Anyway, it does resonate with me. I didn't see it so much as Western philosophy as just my personal philosophy, but
okay.
I now understand the way that he was telling it from different perspectives just elucidates that much more. It's neat.
Yeah, and the Zhuangzi, the Taoist philosophy is multi-set. Okay, so it's common if you go to different, let's say, because sometimes I listen the lecture from the National Taiwan University, some professor, different professor will talk about different things. That depends on how you view it. Okay, but I think that's common, and that's totally fine if you have a different kind of understanding. Yeah. Madeline, please.
Hi, Jason. Thanks.
Yes.
I'm looking at your outline, and I'm looking at my translation,
yes,
which is the Burton Watson. If you can just give me some idea of where the section breaks fall, like the 4 epistemological questions, what is that? What does that section start with? Okay,
the section, for example, right, at the beginning, that's a long conversation. So it's probably like 50% of the event is about, because just like a Socrates dialogue, okay, before is a question and answer. So turn out to become the teacher's long speech. So it goes through many, many pages. Then when I think some English translation doesn't break in the right place, even on the paragraph, okay? Because they may assume this one is part of Nan Guo, the Taoist teacher's speech, the second dialogue. Some people may consider all this one belong to this person's dialogue. Okay, but I think they're different because they're different subject. So if you want to go through my partition, so if you're looking for the Nie Che, okay, the toothless guy, and Wang Ni, okay, when they said Nie Che ask Wang Ni, that's the second part. I try to break down.
Yeah, they seem to, he seems to have not included that. So there's
Yes.
one part that starts, it seems to be on categories of statements. I don't know whether it fits into the category of other people's statements, blah, blah, blah. Is that the start of dialogue 2?
I think so that's in the dialogue. Okay, let's start with a bunch of epistemological questions. How do you know what you don't know? How do you know what you don't know? Okay, this kind of question, very Socratic question, right? How do you know what you don't know? How do you not know you don't know is really not know? This kind of question. That's the starting from the four, I call it the four epistemological question, and which is famous in the later chapter. Zhuangzi also quote, okay, the Nie Che asked only 4 questions and he has no answer. Okay.
So this is the part that goes on. There's a beginning, not a beginning, the tip of the autumn hair, that section?
Yes, yeah, okay. So okay, so that's the section. I think later you will be, because this one, you know, in the ancient Chinese text, there's no punctuation, no, everything just stuck together like a big piece of words, right? So it really depends on how you separate them. Okay, so I think some people may separate totally differently, then that probably makes sense, as long as it makes sense to that person. But I think this one makes a lot of sense, at least to me. Okay, so that's the first time I feel like I can go through the entire chapter. And another
so this is actually the part where it starts with Nie Chui asked Wang Ni, do you know what all things agree in calling right?
Yes, that's the way where they start.
Okay, so that would be the start of section 2.
Yes, and section 3 will start with the I think usually called the 句确词. Okay, I don't know how the translator will do, but basically something 子 ask another 长无子 another 子. Okay, means missing. But I think if you look at the Chinese, well, that means a bird talk to the twig. Don't take so serious. Okay, that's not the okay. That's the chapter 3, because it starts with the dialogue, and then dialogue 4 it talk about the shadow as the penumbra. That's very short.
Yeah, that's a lovely one.
Yeah, and the end one is butterfly tree. So I think if I look at this way, I find out this chapter is very well organized thesis, or you want to call it the PhD dissertation. It's worth to carefully study, but it's difficult, just like Socratic dialogue. You can find a paragraph and carefully study, but when you do that, you lost the whole picture. Okay, so I think that's why a lot of the translation, including Feng You Lan's translation, they skip. Sometimes skip sentence, sometimes skip paragraph. Okay, because sometimes too many details distract you. Okay, but unfortunately, sometimes the translators think this one is distracted, but in my opinion, it could be very important. But if miss it, then you lost the whole picture. So that's the challenge on this one. Okay, so you may see different way to read it, but at that moment, I find out that makes sense. I'm happy. I say, great, that makes sense on this one. Ali, please.
Hi, good evening. I could be completely off but I'm looking at the form of some of the the dicta on page 13 of the book. So I'm looking at the form versus the content. I'm not analyzing the content, but just the form in terms of the way it's written. So at the middle part of page 13, it says the logicians said there's an absolute distinction between right and wrong. The Taoists said there's no such absolute distinction. The one school emphasized the distinctions or the differences between things. The other school stressed non-distinctions or the sameness. Hence, the two schools were always in dispute with one another, with each other. And I think with like, I could be wrong, but I'm looking at this from like the logicians to be more like of Western philosophy because they use maybe more reason, logic. Perhaps they use, some borrow maybe from Greek philosophy or vice versa. And then I'm looking at the Taoist philosophy to be more non-Western, if you will. I don't know. I just was thinking if there's any anything to back up my kind of train of thought. You know what I mean?
I will save I'm glad that you asked this question, okay, but I think it's not very difficult to answer at this moment about Western and this one. Okay, specifically on the logic side, I have to say, Western, when you talk about Western, we should talk about before Aristotle. Okay, I don't know you familiar. You how do you think? Because Aristotle's writing is much clearer. Okay, they have the logic on that, and Plato has no logic. They try to talk about logic, but it's not really logic because Aristotle is not there. So they don't have the tool of logic. Same as this Chinese or most of the Chinese texts, they don't have the Aristotelian syllogism, this kind of concept. So you will find out sometimes they are lengthy, they are not clear. But I agree with you about it. Have the Western feeling on that because the subject matter. Talk about language, talk about dialect, talk about true or not true. Okay, in this sense, it's more close to the Western philosophy. That's my point of view. But you will see more in after we go through the dialogue.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comment, question before we go to there? That's great. We see a lot of people are very serious on this text, and then that's worth to spend time to discuss. And relatively today, we don't have like big group, very big group. Sometimes we go with 20 something, 30. Then I kind of control on the dance of opinion. But today, seems we are fine, in the situation. So welcome to ask question and then share what you thought. I'm happy if you tell me you don't see the same way as I'm thinking, and then that will be very beneficial to me. Okay, so I'm going to the first dialogue. Okay, just be careful. This one is long, so I will have a few stop for question and comment on the first part, and then. So how does this one start? Right, it starts from. Let me read the text, right? Nan Guo Ziqi, okay, who is the Taoist teacher, sit leaning on a table. I put the text here, but based on the Chinese text, I think he's talking about he lying, sitting under the table. Okay, so, but most of people consider it's leaning on the table doing meditation. I think that's too much. Later Buddhism, Taoism, religious Taoism thinking. So they probably assume, the Taoist teacher is sitting, leaning on the table, doing meditation. And I don't see this way, but that's fine. So I think he died sitting under the table because his weird behavior. He looked into the sky and breathed gently, seeming to be in a trance and unconscious of his body. The Chinese word he used here called 若上其偶, okay, 偶 means couple. So here bring the concept of early concept of my body concept here. So Taoism already thinking my body, okay, similar to Descartes, but probably not that clear. Okay, talking about the trance and unconscious of body. So he's talking about he lost his body, lost himself, the mind, and lost his body, look like a dead man. Okay, so the student, okay, Yan Cheng Ziyu, okay, that's the student who was in attendance on him, said, "What is this? Can the body become dust like dry wood and the mind like dead ashes? The man leaning on the table is not he who was here before." So the student noticed the teacher is different. Look like a dead body and a dead mind lying over there or sitting under the table. Okay, so he feel very strange. Why his teacher become like this? So the teacher start to answer. So right now, so he say, Yan, okay, the teacher, the Ziqi, okay, Nanguo Ziqi, your question is very good. Just now, I lost myself. Okay, so he talked about his mind and the body both lost. Do you understand? You may have heard the music of man, but not the music of earth. You may have heard the music of earth, but not the music of heaven. I venture, okay, the student, Ziyu, okay, ask, to ask from you a gentle description of this. So the student doesn't understand. So here, the Chinese word called lai, okay, and in general, we translate as music, but it's not really a music. It's a sound, noise, music, speech. That's all means lai. That's the meaning of this word. So at the opening, it said just like all Socratic dialogue, it set up a very strange set on that. And then I think we need to pay attention on the setting, okay? Because a teacher behaves different. He's alive but look like dead, okay? But he talking about life, which is music, okay? Music, sound, noise, okay? Verb, word. So the entire chapter he want to talk about, that's one way of the interpretation. The whole thing he want to talk about is language. So to answer Ali's question, why do I think this one is very close to Western philosophy? Because the subject, language, okay, logic, direction, okay, and right and wrong, what is opinion? How do we know something we know? Okay, this kind of subject has started to bring up in this chapter. Okay, so that's why I think the beginning is important. So we have a Madeline and a Ian. Madeline, please.
Let's see. So the translation that I have is using piping instead of music.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense considering the gorgeous passage that follows, which is all about wind and air making sounds.
That's right. Yeah, I agree with you. I think since I'm using this book, I don't like before, I always change the translation. Okay, but here, since I'm reading Feng You Lan's translation, and unless I totally disagree, I put the purple words here. Usually I try not to change too much.
Oh, I like your translations better than his, frankly.
Okay. Anyway, thank you for saying that. And but anyway, I think piping next I would say honor the original word. That's that means, if you look at the Chinese word, that means something pass and then they have some noise, some sound come out. That's what that means. Okay. So when we speak, right? Why later on they have the birds? Okay. because he's talking about, does your words have any different than birds sound? Any different? It's just like the air goes through your tube and come out. So in a way, that's a meaning of this pipe. Yang, please.
Hello. I just want to comment about the theme of music. It was
Okay.
also present in Western philosophy, I guess, 2 centuries before Zhuangzi. Because Pythagoras had it. He had the Musica Universalis, or the music of the spheres, right? And then like the 7 planets, the 7 notes, which kind of echoes the 8 notes that you have after this chunk, the 8 sus and the j, the 8 js. So I don't know if that's connected, but yeah, I just thought of that randomly.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this one, the Pythagorean, the music theory. But I think they are starting on the music, but probably go to opposite direction. Okay, and I think in Plato, that's the assume, because I assume Plato is one of is a Pythagoreanism. Okay, Pythagorean. Okay, so he want to make it clear, distinct. And the Zhuangzi go to the other direction. He probably want to say that not much difference. Okay, so I think that's the separate between 2 schools of philosophy. Okay, so after this, right? Then I skipped some part, and unfortunately, that's a Mandarin so-called the beautiful part about the song. Okay, so if you read as literature, and that's important, but I kind of skip this part, and the basis I jump through to the let me see, that's this one. Okay, so Ziyu, the student, okay, said the music of Earth. Of course, he talked about the music. The music of Earth consists of sounds produced by various apertures. So that means the wind blow, anything, birds, anything, right? And music of man is the sound produced by pipe and the flute. Okay, I venture to ask, what's the music of heaven? So here's come with the tricky question, right? He knows, okay, the music of man is whatever we create. Music of the earth is whatever you hear, right? The wind blowing, the rock rolling, all this kind of nature sound. And he doesn't know what's the music of heaven. So here, worth to note it here is the meaning of heaven is first is not Western sense of Christian, heavenly, godly, this kind of meaning. But I think it's also different than Confucius' idea of heaven. In Confucius' idea of heaven is something above, outside this world, looking down our world. And in Taoist heaven is more on our universe, the totality of everything. So here is a good question here. The wind as they blow, the Ziqi, the teacher say, different in thousands of ways, but they all self-produce. Why should there be any other agents to excite them? He didn't answer the question, all right? He just talked about the sound are self-produced. He didn't answer the question, what's the music of heaven? But that's my interpretation. I think he's talking about this. The music of heaven, since the heaven is the totality of everything. So the music of heaven is the totality of all music, of all sounds. Okay, so we are here. That's why we cannot answer, we cannot hear. That's out the boundary. But that's just my my interpretation on this one. Okay, but his point is he used this one to lead to his philosophy. That's later on he want to talk about right and the wrong and opinion. So from here, Nan Guo Ziqi start to his long speech all the way, and then I will see how far we can go for today. And then, of course, I try not to bore everyone because it can become so detailed. And then, okay, Fei Wu, please.
Could wind be a type of music of heaven?
I
Same
don't
as-
know. I don't know.
Similar to thunder or hails. Well, music of earth could be like fountains or ocean sounds. Maybe so he did, if wind is a kind of music from heaven, then he did answer the question.
Yeah, I be honest, I don't know. I think that he instead of answer a question, he give an open question, right? So I think everyone, if you ask me, that will only represent my own understanding at this moment. 2 years from now, I may tell you different thing, but at this moment, I think my understanding is we are in this world, so we are part of this world because his Zhuangzi's theology is pantheism, so which is not Christian theology. Christian theology has a separate, right? There's a God, there's a universe. God created the universe. God is not part of universe. So in this case, in the Christian world, you can hear the music of heaven, because that's God's voice. He outside this world. But since Zhuangzi's theology or Taoism theology is oneness, which is I think we will call pantheism, right? Pantheist. Okay, so that means everything is God. So the totality of the universe is God. Since we are here, we don't know. We cannot hear it. Or you can say everything I hear is the sound of heaven. So, Ali, please.
I just noticed an interesting correlation to slide number 12. Zhu Chi said, so man creates music by using certain apparatuses, and the music of heavens are the winds as they blow. But Zhu Chi goes on to say they differ in thousands of ways, yet are all self-produced. So differ in 1,000 ways. Would that not? Could that not metaphorically mean also that the heavens produce music by using not apparatuses as we know them physically, like a man uses like flute or pipes or whatever and pianos, but more metaphorically that that there's an apparatus of heaven as well that can make music sound differently. Because it says in a different thousands of ways.
Yes.
Does that mean like the sound, or does it mean, I don't know. I think cosmically, I'll use that word cosmic. I don't mean any disrespect to Chinese philosophy. I'm not sure if cosmic is a word, but I know I've learned previously indigenous studies years ago in university, and we used a lot of magical realism, cosmic. It just has this kind of feeling to me, very similar to that. And I think if you use metaphors and if you can look beyond the structures of perhaps like maybe Western philosophy or philosophy that's based on more rational, like rational as we know it, you can, maybe see different things like more of a cosmic view, Yeah, anyway, that's my question.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. But I be honest to you, I have no answer, and I keep looking at the last word, 怒者其谁也. Actually, it's hard to understand. He talking about, actually, he instead of answer the question, he kind of ask another question. He has a, who blow it, right? Who produces? It's all self-produced. That's his answer. But I think his point is not to stuck here. He just used this one as an opening statement. okay, for the rest of his dissertation, okay, we'll call it thesis, okay. So he want to talk about first, remember the scene. He looked like he's dead, but he's not dead because it's also hint. Later on, he's going to talk about the life and the death, this kind of issue. He talked about music, asked the question about music, and he didn't answer the question about music or song. He want to talk about is the language. And the language is important, okay? Well, you can say language is not important because not different than the bird sounds, but it could be important because all our living, our intelligent epistemology, everything rely on our language. So that's why he is talking about this one and not really answer it. And he want to bring you to the subject. And here I skipped some of them, but I want to go jump to directly. He talked about from the music, he talked about the speech, okay? And the speech share your opinion. So if men are to be guided by opinion, okay, who will not have such a guide? So here he has long speech talking about opinion. So everyone can have opinion, and opinion based on another opinion, and opinion based on another opinion. So what's the base on that? Where you starting from? Okay. So he drew a conclusion, and here I highlighted: speech is not merely blowing of wind. It is intended to say something, but what it is intended to say is not absolutely established. So here he started to talk about the language is different than the regular sound, because when you speak something, you have some intention. And the intention, what's the foundation of this intention? So Feng You Lan has the comment here. He said, this shows that all distinction of right and wrong are due to opinion. What is affirmed by one may be denied by the other, right? So here, he tried to talk about is everyone have opinion, okay? And we don't know who is right, who is wrong. Only thing we can agree is everyone have opinion. And this opinion probably baseless, right? And then he moved forward, talk about the language. From the language, start to talk about Tao, okay? And then each school, all school, talk about Tao. So he started to ask a lot of questions. Okay, is there really such a thing as speech? Is there really no such a thing as speech? Someone considers speech as different from the chirping of young birds, but is there any distinction between them, or is there no distinction? So he talked about people speak have a different intention, and so it's different than the bird's song. But since what you spoke is just opinion, which is baseless, then back to the question, is that any difference than the song of birds or the chirping of young birds? How is Tao obscure that there should be a distinction between true and false? How is speech obscure that there should be a distinction between right and wrong? So here, I think the language is not very clear, but basics he is talking about. Based on Tao, you have the true and the false, and based on the speech, you have the right and the wrong. But are they true truth and true false? Are they true right or true wrong? Okay. So Feng You Lan have the comment here. He talked about, I will read to the last part, any word can be predicate of anything. Every word is appropriate anywhere. Okay. So that's Feng You Lan's comment on this part. Madeline, please.
Okay, so now I'm seeing the connection between this and the passage with all the different openings and the wind
Okay.
passing through. So it really would depend then, people might be one type of opening and the birds might be another type of opening. And the chi, or the, I guess maybe even the li, I forget what it was called. near the-
No, that okay. The birds and then the Nietzsche, the toothless guy, and the baby king, Wang Ni. They probably translate as Wang Ni. Right?
Right, so the chi is passing through the openings of people, it's passing through the openings that we call birds. And so it's coming out in different ways.
Yeah.
And so the distinction between them is, okay, thanks. So now I see the connection between this and that other passage.
All right, thank you. And then I think if you read it, you will find out. You know, if I think my purpose probably not teaching. My purpose is I will try to kind of organize, and you will have interest to reread or restudy this part, and then you will get some of your idea. I think that would be my purpose. Yeah. Fred, please.
On the second line there, about speech being distinction between between right and wrong, ethical tone to that. The translation, which I have, says, how can speech be so obscured that it admits the idea of contraries? From your expert opinion, Jason, do you think that Chinese has a more general sense or a more specific sense, a specific application to right and wrong ethically, as opposed to a general sense of what is it? The idea of contraries.
Okay, so first I have to make it clear, and then usually if I don't see that the one Chinese thinking about one way. Okay, to me, this world is bunch of individuals. Okay, so it's hard to answer your question. Does Chinese think this way? I don't know, because there's no average Chinese represent, just like people ask you, how does American think about Trump?
Yeah.
So that's a hard question.
Oh, yeah, I should have known better, Jason. You from that home long enough. I should have known that would be a good.
Yeah, but anyway, that's a legitimate question. Okay, because I can say here he tried to say that's not clear. There's no clear sense of right and wrong, which implied other school insist they have the clear definition of right and wrong. And we will face this one later, because I say this thesis is so deep, is on the surface, it's talking about language, but on the different level, it's talking about the metaphysical, talking about externality. And the purpose could be political, because during that time, the Moism, Confucianism, school of names, all popular, okay, during the time. And their purpose is resolve the political problem, because during that time is the warring state in China. A lot of many states, they fight each other. People see there's another war, look like our world is in trouble, and how to resolve this problem. They come to different school. So in a way, Zhuangzi is response to the political world, respond to Confucianism, to respond to the Moism. This school, they all very insist on what's right, what's wrong, okay? And they also respond to the school of name, which we can call them our logicians. He said, logicians nonsense, because you are going to the wrong direction. So I think you can, if you take the political point of view, that's another purpose of this essay. It's political. Carly, please.
I sort of saw the theme of yin yang coming through this, where even though people see boundaries, they still are interspersed, and they're not that specific, and there's not a distinct polarity, the black and white, that one can jump to without the other. So, yeah, this seems to run sort of like a theme for this particular case.
Yeah, thank you, Kali, to bring up this one about the yin yang. Okay, that's give me my comment on this. Okay, so I think the yin yang is common during that time. They have this concept. Okay, so when you live in this concept, usually you don't talk about it. You just pre-assume yin yang exists. So that's why, in a way, I can answer. No, that's nothing about yin yang because he doesn't care. But just like fish live in the water, everything he talk to you, he will not talk about. When I was in the water, I do this. Because of the water, I do this. Right? He just states the fish. Right? But we are outside. We will notice. Oh, you are in the water. That's why you say so. But fish itself will not say because I'm in the water. Because the water is flowing. That's why you don't do that. Just like birds is flying. It doesn't know the air is helping him. The birds fly. I think that's the situation. So thank you to mention yin yang. So you can put yin yang in the background thought on that. Joe, please.
Hi. So I've been kind of reading those last two lines over and over again. And I wanted to get yours and maybe everyone else's thoughts kind of on it. It almost seems like it's saying, so the Tao being, that from kind of the totality of everything, from the one birth, or from the Tao birth the one, from that birth the two, and all that. And so it's almost like, since we can't understand the totality of everything, how then can we distinguish between what is true and what is false? And then, in almost like, maybe not exactly cause and effect, but what follows, it seems like, and then speech, which is obscured by opinions. If we can't distinguish between true and false because we can't understand the totality of everything, how can we distinguish between right and wrong with speech that is even more obscured by opinions? Does that, I don't know. That's what I was thinking.
That's great. And then I think it's reading Taoism writing and Zhuangzi. Okay, and specifically on this sentence, I think the unclearness is what purpose to doing. So I believe that's the take, because I since read this one probably when I was young and a teenager. I started to read this one, and even it's not requirement, or sometimes we call forbid from school. Okay, and I still read it, and then it comes with a different answer. I remember my teachers told me, "Don't read this one. This one just for fun or something. It's not serious." But I think we can always come back with this and with different serious thinking. Fei Wu, please.
I'd like to attempt to answer Fred's question.
Okay.
What Chinese thinking, right and wrong. I think it depends on what you believe in. If you believe in Confucianism, then you believe in social and family hierarchy. Then you believe, so it's right for the subjects to obey and serve the ruler, children to obey and serve their parents, and younger siblings to obey and serve their older brother, and wives to obey and serve husbands, and also there is a kind of a moral conduct between friends. So if you don't obey and serve, then it's wrong. That's what they believe, because Confucianism was designated to create this obedient and docile men who are easy to be controlled. And if you believe in Tao, such as Lao Tzu and Zhuang Zi, then you believe we are all one and everybody is equal. There is no right and wrong, because everyone's opinion is based on their own experiences, and everyone's experience is unique. So it's much more egalitarian to be a believer in Tao. And there are also lots of other beliefs. So as Jason said, it was very difficult to answer whether Chinese have a general principle on what's right or wrong. It all varies from individual to individual. Thank you.
Thank you, Fei Wu. And then I think Zhuangzi later on had to probably respond on probably similar to your response. He talked about Confucianism because that's the way I read it. You know, when this text is written, okay, they have the Confucian philosophy in the background. So a lot of things, at least the way I read it, he is respond. Zhuangzi is a response to the tradition Confucian teaching. Okay, and remember, when we call Confucianism, it's not founded by Confucius, the person. Okay, the so-called in Chinese word, Chinese doesn't call it 孔子学 or something like this. Confucianism. Chinese call the Confucians as 儒家, the school of Ru. And the Ru, this word has long tradition before Confucius, at least a couple 100 years, 500 years before Confucius. So, so Zhuangzi had this kind of concept of course, he knows Confucius, who is Confucius, but he has a bigger job is to respond to the Confucius teaching. So let me move on to the second part. Okay, well, no, the next part. Okay, we're still in the same dialogue, this long dialogue. Okay, he continued. Okay, talking about reason. That's the translation from Feng You Lan. Okay, I think he probably put too much Western thought on that. Okay, look at the Chinese word 明. Okay, that's 日月. That means sun and the moon means very bright. So I would prefer translate these words as enlightenment. But if you want to insist enlightenment is reason, that's the age of reason. That's why we call enlightenment. Now, I have no argument against this, but I would prefer a word to call enlightenment. One of the reasons is the reason this word is too westernized and easy being confused because Kant has his reason is different than Hegel's when Hegel talked about reason. So that's my opinion. But anyway, let me just use Feng You Lan's translation. So the important here is he talked about Tao. Remember, still the Taoism teacher is talking. Okay, in my opinion, some people will say that's Zhuangzi talking because that's separate essay. But I think this one is belong to the Guo Xiang's speech because he started from music. He started by playing death and then talking about music. Answer the question of the music of heaven. He talked about speech and then he talked about opinion, talking about right and the wrong, talking about Tao, which is true and false. Then here he want to talk about reason or how do we know. Okay, so or we want to call it enlightenment. So he called Tao is obscured by partiality. So that means true and false. All right, it got obscured. Speech is obscured by eloquence. That's the right and the wrong. So if you remember in Plato's dialogue, right, there's a Protagoras, no, not Protagoras, Gorgias. And you see Demos, right? You see Demos, right? They all talking about the speech. You are so good, sophistry. Okay, so you are good at speech. You can switch from the right and the wrong. So here, Zhuangzi is talking about. So the result is affirmation and the denial of Confucianism and Moism. So he started to respond to what they were talking about, right? He started to talk about Confucianism and Moism. So here he talked about Confucianism say this one is right, Moism say this is wrong. So both are reasonable, right? So what does it mean? That means there's no such thing as right and wrong. So you should take this one as during that time, the popular school is Confucianism and Moism. Okay, that's the two schools. They are totally opposite, but they are moral teaching. They all right, but they all say each other is wrong. Okay. So this one he proved. Okay, there's nothing right and wrong because Confucius and the Moism both are great people, great philosopher, but they are totally opposite. So right and wrong cannot be opposite. Right and wrong must be opposite, but you cannot have the two right thing opposite. So in this sense, he will say, there's no such thing as right and wrong. Yeah, please.
Just a side comment on the word Ming, the Chinese word shown here. So it actually means brightness, literally, right, Jason?
Yes. Yes.
And it's just so beautiful that you translated it as enlightenment. So like the last two words of the chapter, Ming, so it's like
Yeah,
to enlighten. And
yeah, more Yiming. So one way to think about the Yiming is use the lightning. So if you take this one as verb or action, in this sense, you can call it reason, right? Because mean is some phenomenon. So the way to become this phenomenon, which is reason. In this way, Feng You Lan also do it the right thing. So, okay, so the next thing, I think is very famous, and I will briefly talk about the finger and the horse. So the famous talking about the finger and the horse is in this chapter, and that's spoke by Guo Xiang, okay, the teacher he's talking about. So the language is very confused. If I read in Chinese, it will sound very like 以子喻子之非子，不若以非子喻子之非子也；以马喻马之非马，不若以非马喻马之非马也。天地一子也，万物一马也。I'm not sure, how many people really can understand this word, but I can say, in generally speaking, I think I'm going to, because I read some article, and I think that's written by the Western philosopher talking about the school of names. Okay, I think they do it very well, good job, because you need to understand the school of names in Western foundation. Otherwise, it's very difficult to understand just in the area of Chinese philosophy. So here, talk about whenever we talk about finger, because the finger means this, right? And Chinese called 子, which also the same meaning as essence. Okay, so when people talk about 子, finger, right? Usually, because the finger you can point to things. So it could mean particular, it could mean things, could be means essence. Okay, it could also mean subject. If you take as a subject and the predicate. Okay, so that's the subject. Say this is a cup. So you point to this one, that's the subject. So he's talking about in this world, everything you can use your finger to point. So in the entire thing, you can say this. You don't need the word, you just point, this. If you remember, if you read Wittgenstein's talking about the philosophical investigation, right? He talked about this, right? You can point, okay, this, you can use point, right? And then except your finger, you can use this finger to point to my finger. That's what he tried to talk about. He talked about the horse, and in the Taoism or Chinese, ancient Chinese tradition, when you talk about horse, you refer to famous argument that the white horse is not horse. I talked about years ago, and then I will repeat. I have another section talk about this one. Basics, there's sophist, you want to call it sophist or dialection. Okay, he talk about why horse is not horse. Okay, so when philosopher talk about horse, okay, usually means the name. Okay, so he talk about everything you can name it. So the opposite than the point and the name. So basic, instead of talking about subject, when you talk about horse, he talk about the predicate. Finger, we talk about the particular, and the horse, we talk about the universal, right? And then instead of essence, which is finger, and the horse just a name. So basically here, he is arguing against the school of name because they spend time to, or you want to call the logicians. Okay, this school is very similar to the Western philosophy. If you read the scholastic philosophy, they all spend a lot of time to argue what's particular, what's universal, what's realism, what's nominalism, all this kind of, today we may say nonsense argument, but that's their argument. And the school of name is doing this job. So Zhuangzi just reject them. It's everything you can point, okay, with your finger. Everything you can just name it. You can name this pen and call pen, okay? You can name this cup called cup. You can make a name called something, then these two together. So you can randomly group things together and give a name. You can randomly separate it and give a name. So that's Zhuangzi try to talk about. So here, Zhuangzi is rejecting, I think this part is important in the Nanguo Ziqi, the teacher's teaching. He go to the political side. He is rejecting Confucianism, Moism, and the school of name. These three are all popular during that time, and they all have their own political purpose. So let me give a brief introduction of these three schools. Okay, so you can see here, Confucianism, okay, is talking about xiao, which means filial piety, how to treat your parent. Right? Talking about ren, the humanism, benevolence, treat your countrymen. Okay, so Moism, okay, Moism is another school run by Modi. Okay, that's another school. Today is not popular, but during that time it's popular. Okay, they all try to resolve the problem in the warring state because they all imagine in the ancient time, people live in the peaceful life, and how come today there's so many wars between? So they try to resolve the problem. So Moism talking about is universal love. It's more like Christians apage, right? So you love, so unbiased love. So they attack each other. Okay, Moism said, you should love your countrymen, you should love your neighbor, okay, just more like a Christian kind of love. And the Confucians say, no, if you love my neighbor's father, the same as my father, that's just like animal, okay? So the love has a degree change, okay? So they are different. Confucius, if you're familiar with Confucius teaching, talking about the ritual. So when your parent died, you have 3 years of mourning. Moism just opposite. Here's an essay called "The Simplicity in Funeral." Moism think funeral is totally waste money, it's nonsense, you know. So only for the rich man can afford. Okay, most of people cannot afford. So he reject this. Confucius focus on music, poetry, this ancient teaching, because that's part of the ceremony, and they will cultivate human moral. If you listen to the good music, you will become a good person. That's a Confucius belief. And then Moism has something called condemnation of music. Waste time is more utilitarian. It's totally no use. That's a use man's business. That's a rich man's a job. That's no use on that. So about ghost, Confucius famously said there's stay away from the ghost. He doesn't say there's no ghost, no spirit. He doesn't want to talk about this because that's the other world. He told you need to understand this world. Okay, don't think about other worlds. If you don't understand this world, how can you understand the other world? But Moism had a different thinking. They think they have the writing called knowing the ghost. So to Moism, ghost is important because ghost play the role of reward and the punishment. So they all have a moral purpose. They all have their political purpose. They all want people to be good. They want this world to be peaceful. But look at their theory. They all opposite. So does that make sense? That in Zhuangzi's voice, does that make sense? They are opposites. Both are good. Does that make sense to talk about good or bad, right and wrong? Does that make sense? That's Zhuangzi's answer to this one. Then here's another school called the School of Names. I don't want to spend too much time. I have the plan to spend a whole section talking about this school. It's a very interesting school. Basically, they focus, most of the people, especially in, I think this school is not being focused enough in Asia. I think probably in the Western philosophy or focus more on this school. Because the two key things they are talking about, one is dialectic, okay, or you want to call it the sophistry. And then another thing is classification, how to distinguish things. Confucians see them as sophistry because you just talk. White horse is not horse. Come on, everybody know white horse is a horse, but you try to argue this, you just want to mess up this word. But I think, okay, which agree with some of a lot of scholar, modern scholar, kind of think School of Name, the political purpose is they try to support Confucianism because Confucians have a good teach about the rectification of names. Okay, because as a father, you need to act like a father. As a son, should be like a son. As a prince, you should be like a prince. As a minister, you should be like a minister. So the name is important. And then School of Name use logic to distinguish all these names. He think that since name is important, so that's make it clear. I think that's their purpose. And the Zhuangzi's rejection on the School of Name basics, just like on the previous chapter we talked about the finger and the horse. Basically, he said, everything you can name something, everything you can point something, then, you know, in the entire world, you can use one finger to point. It's not the point. It's not important. You know, let's go to other things. So that's the part on this speech. Yeah. So I will stop for 1 minute if you have a question or any comment on this one. I think today we will finish up to the Nan Guo Ziqi's speech. And after that, Nan Guo Ziqi is going to talk about his, because we all address the problem, right? And then the Confucianism problem, the Moism's problem, address the problem of logicians. And he will propose his own idea, okay, which I call it oneness. Okay. We have a hands up. Carly, you have a hands up? Or?
No, I think I got distracted by thinking about Stoicism and the roles. Where one role designates that, and that name may designate what their role and their activity is only within that section.
Yeah,
is that
in this sense, it's similar, right?
okay?
Okay. So let's move on to the Zhuangzi or the Nan Guo Ziqi want to talk about. He reject all this one. He want to talk about is so-called oneness. So here I want to highlight this word, 道通为一. So I think it's in the Lao Tzu, okay, 道德经 also talk about one. Everything is one. There's no separate. So I think it's in Western philosophy we call simple, right? It's not composite, it's simple. So again, these words in Chinese is also difficult to read. 可乎可不可乎，可乎可不可乎不可，道行而知. Okay, then it's chicken tongue. Okay, but I think the English make it some clear. Okay, the possible is possible, the impossible is impossible. The Tao makes things and they are what they are. What are they? They are what they are. What are they not? They are not what they are not. Everything is something and is good for something. There is nothing which is not something or is not good for something. Thus, it is that there are roof, slate, and the pillar. And I think roof, slate, the basic, he's talking about the beam and the column, ugliness and the beautiful, the particular and the extraordinary. That's the original Chinese used different name of ghost. Okay, and all this by means the Tao are united and become one. So here I skip some part of his writing, but basics he tried to say is the ugly. So, you know, if you go through, he talking about the true and the false. They actually, if you talk in the point of Tao, they are one. The right and the wrong, it's just different opinion from your speech, and they are one. Okay, and here he more talk about on your feeling, right? He talk about the bin and the column, which they are the same thing, but you just put it horizontal, you call it the bin. You put it vertical, you call it the column. Okay, and the ugliness, right? He used the two-person Li and the Xi Si. That's the famous people in the Chinese tradition, the ugly girl and the beautiful girl. Okay, so they are the same. They're all women. Okay, then you know. So the beautiful or not beautiful basics depend on how you judge and the point of view you take. So that's the Zhuangzi theory, and then that would be the Nanguo Ziqi's speech on that. So Nanguo Ziqi, then the rest I'm going to talk about Nanguo Ziqi. Remember, in my categorization, this one still in Nanguo Ziqi's speech. And just like all the Socratic dialogue, they all end with some story. So to the end, Nanguo Ziqi put 3 stories on that, 3 short stories. Some translator, interpreter will consider that's a separate story, but I think these 3 are the same story, okay, in the same person's speech. So I will go through the 3 stories. If you have any comment before I talk about 3 stories. Okay. First one. This one is a famous story, okay? So 3 in the morning, 4 in the evening. So the story is, of course, is simple, okay? So you talk about a keeper of monkeys, once ordered concerning the monkey's ration of acorn, that each monkey was to have 3 in the morning and 4 at night. But at this, the monkeys were very angry, okay? The monkey can talk in the Zhuangzi's word, the animal can talk. So the keeper said that they might have 4 in the morning, but 3 at the evening. With this arrangement, all monkeys were well pleased, and the actual number of acorns remained the same, but there was a difference as to monkey. Okay, so the story is simple. The monkey keeper gives the monkey 3 in the morning, 4 at the evening, and the monkey is not happy. And then the zookeeper just decides, okay, I give you 4 in the morning and 3 in the evening. The monkey is happy. So the total is still 7, but they have different. And today in Chinese, saying called 朝三暮四, okay, 3 in the morning, 4 in the evening, usually means you change your mind often, or you indeterminate, you cannot make your own decision. But that's not Zhuangzi want to talk about, because people, for 1,000 years, people start to have a different interpretation. And I think this one is very important, the comment on this. on the end, right? So what Zhuangzi said, so the keeper act accordingly, okay? Therefore, I think we will start from here, the sage, okay? The sage here, Zhuangzi used sage as a Taoism sage, not Confucian sage. So the sage harmonized the system of right and the wrong, and the rest in evolution of nature. This is called two causes at once. In Chinese, it called 圣人何之以是非而修乎天君，是之谓两行 or 两行. Okay, I think these words have many interpretations, and eventually I find out Feng You Lan's translation is pretty good. He called this one 两行 means two lines. Okay, so I think here he means Zhuangzi means parallel. Okay, two line parallel. So Zhuangzi is talking about in the case, okay, Taoism and Confucian, they are opposite. Which one I have to go? I think here is the moral teaching here. He talk about the sage harmonize, okay, the system of right and wrong. Okay, so I put a note here is I don't want to get confused about the Confucianism talking about harmonize. It's not like put them together, no difference. I think they are just treat them the same. Okay, just like a two parallel line, you don't go either one. Okay, you just keep the two systems running at the same time. Okay, I think that's what Zhuangzi means. And the Feng You Lan also have a good interpretation here. I put in this text, right? Although the system of right and the wrong are but the human judgment have no validity from the point of view of nature. Yet the people do pass this invalid judgment is a fact. This fact is a natural phenomenon, just as anything else. So the sage said, rest in the revolution of nature. Just that, you want to say, just let the different opinion alone, and do not dispute or interfere with them. They do not abolish the sage. I talk about Taoism. They do not abolish the different opinion. They just transcend them. This is called following two courses at once. Okay, so you follow in two courses at the same time. One thing I have a little bit of opinion, suggestion to Feng You Lan, disagree with Feng You Lan is, I think he's more Confucian than me. Okay, so he used the word transcend the different opinion. I think, in my opinion, I think he means beyond. But in my opinion, is you should go in between. Okay, and between, not in the middle, is fuzzy, fuzzy route in between. Okay, so that's my opinion. But I respect Feng You Lan's translation. He talked about transcend that. I believe he means go beyond this. So that's the first story. Then let me go to the second story. Okay, so here, remember at the beginning, he talked about light, which is called piping, or you want to call sound, or call music. Here, that's the reason I believe all these stories belong to the Nangong Ziqi's speech, his long speech, ended with 3 stories. So here he talked about, I'm not going to read the text, but basically he's talking about 3 famous people during that time. One called Zhao Wen, he's a good lute player, which I think that in today we call pipa, kind of guitar in Chinese time, in Chinese version of guitar in the ancient time, lute. Zhao Wen is famous lute. And Shi Kuang is play the stick, okay, during the time. So he's a good drummer. And he talked about his good friend, Hui Zi, okay. He has a debate with Zhuangzi all the time through, okay. So Hui Zi is good in speech. So he talked about he lie on the tree, I don't know, Zhuang tree. My understanding, this one should call the Polonian tree. That's the Polonian tree, I think. Okay, so that's the tree. Okay, so it means he lean on the tree to talk. So remember these three: one play the music, one do drumming, one speak. They all related to sound. Okay, and they are very famous for what they are doing. So here, he tried to talk about people. They talk about learning their goods. Okay, the knowledge of each of the three masters in their arts were nearly perfect, and therefore each practiced to the end of his life. Because they were fond of it, they wished to enlighten people. But people will not be enlightened by their art. So Huizi ended up, they talk about, actually it's not doing good. So I think here he wants to talk about when you are being skillful on something, you keep use your skillful and you miss something. So the idea Zhuangzi here is talking about if you are good at something, actually you are at the cost of not good at something. So turnout is not much different. When people are enlightened by your skillfulness, but actually they are enlightened by your name. So that's what he want to talk about. And this conclusion, I do it, and which I disagree with Feng You Lan's translation, because the Chinese word here called Tu, but I think the actual word should call Bi, which means despise. Okay, so I think that's the thing. But I think my translation makes more sense. So the conclusion is here. Therefore, the glory of this skill is what the sage despise. Okay, the Taoist sage doesn't like this kind of skills, because skill, I highlight here, the skill should not be used but kept in the daily life. This is called enlightenment. Again, we call it Yiming, okay. And Feng You Lan, the translation is reason, but I think I will call it enlightenment. So I think here is important. The concept in Zhuangzi is very important here. Zhuangzi talk about you're probably good at playing music, you're good in singing, you're good in running marathon. You don't use this skill. You use this skill in the daily life, okay? Not really for the utilitarian purpose, but for 不用而欲出用,用 means usually. So he kind of thinking about the skillfulness and the usefulness and get the name. They all not important, and the real usefulness of your skillfulness is in the daily life. And then later on, Feng You Lan put some excellent comment. I think I will skip this part, and I probably will, when I come back to this section, probably in next month, I will put more detail on this part, which Feng You Lan comment, I think is excellent. Talk about Zhuangzi, this concept is same as, I think he take the epistemological point of view. He talked about Zhuangzi, this concept is the same as what William James talked about, pure experience. And then he quoted from the William James essay in Radical Empiricism. Okay, so I think roughly speaking, he's talking about traditionally we know things as from change the subject and the object. When we know subject, we cannot do subject. But when we talk about our experience, actually there's no difference about subject or object. All you want to talk about is no different from your sensation or from your rational. Okay, so that's the whole American pragmatism school. Pragmatism is talking about. So Feng You Lan, since he is a student of Zhuang Zi, so no surprise he mentioned about this. I think this short paragraph is excellent. And the Zhuangzi have another part which he talked about in Chinese called 宝光. Okay, so the translation called it the preservation of enlightenment. So I will skip this part, even I think this one is very good, and then I think I don't want to spend another hour to talk about this, but I think that's very good. But in my understanding, this short Chinese or long English translation basically talk about, remember before we talk about enlightenment, but in the Western sense of enlightenment, we just enlightened, right? It's a phenomenon. But in Zhuangzi's idea, that's something more important. When you get enlightened, you should preserve the enlightenment. That's his point. When you understand things, I understand, you want to go beyond that. That's what he's talking about. All right. So I will skip this part for now, and then we'll come back, and then let me finish today's section by the third story. And when we finish this story, that means we finish the first dialogue. And the next 3 dialogues is much shorter, and then I think we can do it next time. So let me finish this story, and then basics. Then he talked about the final story. He talked about ancient sage Yao and Sun, right? He talked about that the story is, I think for most people probably sounds very weird, but let me talk about the story. The Yao is the emperor of the entire China. He said that there's 3 countries called Dong, Huai, and Xuao. Okay, I think that's in the southern barbarian country. He want to conquer them because they never submit to him. What should I do? And then Sun, another sage king, tell him, the ruler of these 3 states are still living in primarily among the markwood and the brushwood. Why do you not put them out of your mind? Once upon a time, Sun quoted ancient mythology, right? He talked about once upon a time, 10 suns come up together and all things were illuminated there. How much more virtual illuminated seems okay. So he talked about in ancient time that the 10 suns come out, they are not compete each other. Why you worry about these 3 countries, right? So I think that would be difficult for today's reader, especially in the people in Western world, quite difficult to understand the concept here. But he's quoted the ancient mythology. Okay, so but I find out one thing. Thanks, Fred mentioned about the person, Michel de Montaigne, right? And on his thesis, he talked about cannibals, right? He talked about noble savage. So basically, if you forget about the story, it's just exactly like what Montaigne, Michel de Montaigne in the 18th century, French philosopher, talking about the noble savage, right? In the savage world, they look like they are barbarian, but they have their own virtue, they have their own moral standard, so similar to this thinking. So I will end with this text about the Guo Xiang's comment and the Feng You Lan's comment. Although the sun and the moon have no selfish preference in their illumination, yet there are still things beyond range. But in virtue, there is no unhappy. So we talk about these 3 barbarian countries, right? If you conquer them, you don't benefit as a conqueror, right? But they also don't benefit from your civilization because they don't enjoy your civilization. So that's not different. So here go a little bit political here, right? Why different states they have a war against each other? Everyone have your own standard. There's no such thing right and wrong, and even no such thing as a civilization and barbarians, right? So that everyone enjoy its own nature and have its own satisfaction and leave everything leave them alone, each in its own proper sphere. Then they are content and they also happy. That's Guo Xiang's comment. And the Feng You Lan here, he talking about this shows the equality of civilization and barbarian, and there is a variety in the way of living, just as there is a variety of things. These differences are of equal value. So all the value are equal. They don't mixing in they don't remove the difference. They still keep the difference, but they view things at the same value. So we finish the first part, and then I probably will leave. Next week we will do it as scheduled, talking about chapter 3. All right, and then I will come back to finish this one, chapter 2, on this one, because chapter 3 also is very short. Okay, so we can have more discussion on this one, and then I think I make the first part finish. It's about 50% of this chapter, and to be honest, this chapter is very long. It's very difficult, and I try my best to introduce this one. And I hope you don't lose the entire picture of this chapter. Yeah. Let's have a few minutes discussion. If you have any comment, suggestion, or question, yeah, welcome. Okay, we have Madeline, CK, and Iya. Madeline, please.
Thanks, Jason. This is a very long and complex chapter with kind of intertwined themes throughout various parts.
Yeah, I think the Plato's dialogue is the same, right? So I find out after spend time to read Plato's dialogue, it really helped me to read this text. It's a training.
So I have two questions about this passage. First one is if the word that's being translated as virtue is de. And the second question is, I think in Sun Tzu, we had discussed there were the 9 somethings, and there was a sense that 9 or 10 gave a kind of completeness. So it might be not the equivalent of the 10,000 things, but it might be the sense of completing a set.
Okay, let's put it this way. First, about on this text, in general, translate as virtue. Okay, I think that's correct. But one thing I would like to mention here is if you're familiar with Hinduism called guna. Okay, so I would say de would be probably proper. If I have to translate, it should be translated as guna, as in Hinduism guna. Okay, so it also means capability. So, okay, so that's the only I have to say. About 10 and 9, I don't see, I think 9 is a Taoism kind of thinking, especially in the Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, but I don't see that much on the Zhuangzi's philosophy. We need to remember, when we talk about Zhuangzi and the Lao Tzu, we kind of see them as connection. Lao Tzu is the founder, Zhuangzi is the disciple, but actually probably not in this way if you get close on his text, their text, because Lao Tzu and the Zhuangzi's philosophy really have a significant difference. Lao Tzu is more interested in talking about 80% effort, okay, not push it to the full. Zhuangzi is more talking about indistinguishable. Okay, everything should be the same. Okay, it's and fuzzy. Okay, this kind of concept. So they have some subtle difference, and then it's in another way. If you treat it, both of them are the same. Just like if you don't treat Plato and Aristotle as the same philosopher. Even Aristotle is Plato's student, but if you look close to the text, you will see they are probably opposite. So that's I have to answer. Yeah. CK, please.
Yeah, I just have a general comment because there are some comments and questions about the Chinese way of thinking. I think if I can say something about that, I think the Chinese mind is a very flexible one. It's very syncretic. You don't have either or generally. The Chinese mind, the Chinese as a people are very good at co-opting ideas, of integrating ideas and then synthesizing them. I'll give an example of one of my friends in Taipei. She's a Catholic. She goes to the Taoist temple to pray, and then she also goes to the Buddhist temple to pray. And then when I asked her why, she said it's a matter of buying insurance, so there's no harm in doing that. But if you follow the Catholic doctrine zealously, you are not supposed to do that, of course. You just only believe in one God. But it doesn't matter to them, if they can. And she's not the only Chinese or Catholic that I know that is doing that. So it's a very flexible mind, to tell the Chinese that this is you are this and you're not that. Some doesn't work most of the time. They like to co-opt things. They like to include people. They like to synthesize things. And I think that's my general observation.
No, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I have the same impression, but yeah, that's true in this sense. Yang, please.
Yeah, I can confirm that too. I'm actually Chinese Filipino. I'm a Catholic, and here I am studying Taoist philosophy. So, but yeah, my question would be about the word barbarism. So I just thought, like, did Zhuang Zi or like Lao Tzu, did they have any did they proselytize at all to non-Chinese? Did they spread their beliefs to them?
Well, I have to answer your question in this way. Okay. First, during that time, they probably have no non-Chinese. Well, they have the non-Chinese in their sense, but they are barbarian, which they are illiterate. So the answer could be no, right? Because there's no American, no Greek, okay? No Jews, okay? So the answer probably no, okay? That's what I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
And one interesting story is on the 7th or 8th century, when the Xuanzang, the monk, traveled to India, bring Indian sutra to China and translate to Chinese. And the Chinese emperor decided to translate the Tao Te Ching, the Taoist writing, into Sanskrit and ask people to send to India, because he thinks that's also a good philosophy to spread to the foreign land. But we never hear the account about Indian learn Taoism teaching. Probably they disrespect Chinese, or probably the messenger just got lost, killed, never bring the translation over there. I don't know, but I think that's one historical account. Chinese try to spread Taoism teaching, but the Confucian teaching has been spread, but not to the West, to the East, to Korean in I think the 10th century, to the Japan. So that's what happened. Fei Wu, please.
So Jason, Han Taizong was a believer of Tao.
because their last name is Li, right? And the same last name as Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu's last name is Li Er. So in this sense, they believe Taoism, but when they talk about Taoism, probably not the Taoism I'm talking about. They probably more interested in the religious Taoism, which is quite popular in Taiwan. Is the shamanism, this kind of thing. Okay, so that's a little bit different. Yeah. So, but in a way, the answer is yes, because I think the main reason is they share the same last name as Lao Tzu.
Yeah. So whenever the rulers believed in Tao, China prospered. Like during early Han Dynasty and the Tang Dynasty, when China reached its peak, it was when the rulers, the kings, who followed Tao. Small government.
Well, if you have this observation, and that's fine, that's you can see. But I don't see this way. But that's fine. That's no fixed answer on this. And because the Tao is always a very strange thing to discuss, and I think some people is in the group of doing the art of war, and Sun Tzu as a military guy, he also talking about Tao, right? Everything has a Tao. So Confucius also talking about Tao, okay, but they are different, okay, and then are they going to be the same? I don't know, Just learn from today's section, right? Everyone have their own opinion, and we really don't know who is right, who is wrong.
What I meant was that they believed in smaller government, like the best governor governs the least. That kind of concepts that let people be. So the nation prospered and the people were relatively freer and happier and more creative. Because
that's what I believe Zhuangzi is talking about. Yeah, that's what I believe. Okay.
What do you mean? What you believe?
Because I believe, because everybody has a different interpretation of Zhuangzi's teaching. And my understanding, okay, is Zhuangzi will support the small state, and then everyone do its own things, and don't bother each other, leave me alone. Okay, and everyone will be happy, they'll be peaceful, because you conquer other world. It's no benefit for the conqueror, and no benefit for the country being conquered. So that's Zhuangzi's opinion.
Yeah. So maybe I should have been more specific when I said that when the rulers followed Tao, I meant Taoist philosophy.
Okay, yeah, that could be right. Yeah. I just answer your question on the historical fact, right? Because Tang Taizong and the Tang Dynasty is famous for they respect the Taoism. Okay, but I think the reason is they share the same last name. Yeah, please.
Sorry, Jason, this is a more specific question on the first part. I noticed like there was like are like the nostrils, the apertures, basically there was a list of them.
Mm-hmm.
So there was 8 si, like are like the nostrils, are like the mouth, and then there are 8 jaw. So I thought, like, is there a mystical interpretation for this, or
You mean
should we just take it?
You mean the very first slide, very first opening sentence?
No, I'll chat it in the. Oh no, it's bad.
Is that on the beginning?
I don't think it's in your slides. It's in the actual text. It starts with take the projecting bluff of a mountain forest in the great trees.
Okay.
Shan Lin Zhi Wei Jia, and then the rest is like, and then there was a list.
When he explained the the music of earth, right? He lists the different things, right?
Yeah, is there a mystical, like a religious Taoist interpretation of this, or something deeper in the philosophical side?
Okay, that comes with my personal preference. Okay, so which will be different than I will not say majority, but they have some people tend to explain everything in Taoism in the mysticism way. Okay, so to me, I don't do this. Okay, so if you've been in my section for a while, you probably know I don't interpret anything to, for example, take this word, they have the 8 different things, and then I try to line up with some mystical idea, some unknown, and then okay, yeah, I see your text here. Yeah. Let's talk about. So for the reason I skip this one, I see this one just rhetorical. Okay, because he want to. It's a literature writing, right? So you want to you talk about the different song, different. He just want to list, which is not even complete. He just want to be description. But some people take serious on this word and then will dig to the Taoism, religious Tao, mysticism. Okay, so
right.
In this text, okay, we call Zhuangzi 33 chapter. In another way, I assume you know some Chinese. The book I bought actually is not called Zhuangzi, it's called Nanhua Zhen Jing. Okay, that's the true sutra of southern China. Okay, so it's a Taoism text. Okay, they read it, they chant it, you know, they do it in a different way. Okay, but I didn't see this way. Okay, I see this one is a philosophical writing. It's a philosophy, and then they share with the Western philosophy in this way. I don't see it's a sutra, and then you chant it, you know. And so some people do chant it. This one consider one this
Right. Okay.
sacred.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're done for today. If you have no more comment, question, okay. So okay, CK, you have a last comment.
Just one very general comment about the Tang Dynasty. I don't think they became the country became strong or prosper because of the practicing of the Taoist philosophy. I don't think so, because they adopted what the centralization of government inherited from the Qin Dynasty through legalist methods, and they fine-tune it. So it's not really small government. The Tang has a lot of government officials. Some of them staffed by foreigners, including Japanese and Koreans, Ryukyu people, Mongols, Tatars. So they are a very effective government. They were a very effective government. It's not small government at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, but that's a historical thing. It's many things we can talk. Yeah, but anyway, thank you very much. And next week we will move on to chapter 3. Even this one we just halfway done, and then I will find time coming back for the part 2. And this one I will finish the rest of dialogue. So I think the next section could be more interesting, because I will just quickly review on the first part and go through the rest. And I'm sure we will have time. And if we have enough time, I will spend time to talk about the Feng You Lan, talking about the pure experience from William James. I think that part is very interesting. So thank you very much. And next week we'll talk about chapter 3. The famous scene is the cook Ding, right? The person, the butcher who cut the knife. And also the purpose, remember, it's not skillfulness, it's how to nurture your life. That's Zhuangzi's answer on this. So Fei Wu, please.
When I was talking about small government, I meant relatively speaking. For example, the USA is a smaller government compared to the current Chinese government, who micromanage every aspect of their subjects' lives.
Yeah.
Because the US has a smaller government, probably one of the smallest in the world today. And as a result, the USA is the most powerful and the prosperous nation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And then I just want to remind everyone on the chapter 1, I'll talk about the happy excursion, the big birds, the small birds. And then here, we talk about the opinion, big and the small, it's relative. Yeah, so they all right. And then we will go so-called the 两行, okay, one course, okay, two course at once. Okay, so that's what I learned on Zhuangzi. Yeah, and great to have everyone here. It's a difficult section, and thank you. Most of the people stay awake, I assume. And then I see you next week. We talk about cooking. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
You're
My
welcome.
Thank you, Jason.
My concept
Thank you.
of government is self-governing, no government.
All right, see you guys.